You barely use that garage anyway, my husband said at dinner, not looking up from his phone. Derek needs somewhere to stay. It's just temporary. I nodded, finished my water, and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I made a plan. The garage had taken me 2 years and $19,000 to build into something worth being proud of. Not the kind of pride you feel about a new car or an expensive jacket, the kind that sits low in your chest, solid and quiet, because you built it with your own hands and your own money, piece by piece, decision by decision. I had insulated the walls myself, watching YouTube videos on cold winter nights when my husband, Marcus, was out with his friends. I had hired an electrician for the wiring because I wasn't stupid about my limits, but I had painted every wall, laid every inch of the flooring, and assembled the ceiling-mounted track lighting system on a ladder by myself, on a Saturday in March, when Marcus slept until noon. I was 31 years old, a commercial photographer with a client list that had taken 7 years to build. My studio in the garage was where I shot product photography for 3 e-commerce brands, did headshots for local professionals, and occasionally rented the space to other freelance photographers in the area for a fee that quietly paid our water bill every month. I had a seamless backdrop system, a professional-grade lighting kit worth more than most people's monthly rent, a calibrated editing station, and a small waiting area with 2 chairs and a succulent I had managed, against all odds, to keep alive. Marcus had never once stepped foot in it to work. He used it to grab his bike on weekends and once to store Christmas decorations in November because the attic stairs were, in his words, a lot. His brother Derek had been couch surfing since losing his apartment 4 months ago. This was not the first time Derek had lost an apartment. It was, by my count, the third. The first time was because he stopped paying rent to invest in a cryptocurrency that no longer existed. The second time was because his roommate, a friend since high school, finally reached a limit that Derek had been testing for years. The third time this time was because Derek had decided that his job at the sporting goods store was beneath his energy and quit without notice or a backup plan, which meant he also couldn't cover February. He had been sleeping on our couch since Valentine's Day. It was now late April. I had been patient about it. I had stocked the guest bathroom with fresh towels. I had not said anything when he ate the leftovers I had packed for lunch 3 days in a row. I had not commented when he started using the living room television as a personal cinema starting at 10 in the morning, or when his PlayStation controller permanently migrated to the coffee table, as though it had always lived there. I kept my mouth shut because Marcus had asked me to, and because Derek was his brother, and I understood that family was complicated. What I did not understand, and what I still struggle to explain even now, is how Marcus could sit at our kitchen table on a Tuesday evening and say what he said as though it were a reasonable thing. Derek needs more space. He needs privacy. The couch isn't sustainable long term. I had agreed with that. I had been agreeing with that silently for weeks. And then Marcus said, he could use your studio. Just for a few months. You can shoot at clients' locations. You've done it before. I set my fork down. That's my business, I said. I know. But it's also a garage attached to a house we both own, and my brother needs a room. I have equipment in there worth more than your car. We'd move it into the spare bedroom. The spare bedroom was 11 feet by 9 feet. It had a closet full of Marcus's old college gear and a window that faced a brick wall. My seamless backdrop alone was 8 feet wide. That won't work, I said. You could figure it out. You're resourceful. He smiled when he said it, like that was a compliment. I looked at him across the table. He was already picking his phone back up. The conversation, in his mind, was essentially over. He had presented the idea. I had raised a small objection, and now we were in the part where I would think about it overnight and come around by morning, because that was the pattern, wasn't it? I would push back gently and then absorb the request because it was easier than the alternative, and we both knew it. Let me think about it, I said. Of course, Marcus said. Derek's a good guy. He just needs a leg up. Derek had been getting leg ups his entire adult life. I had provided several of them personally, including the $800 I had quietly transferred to Marcus to cover Derek's portion of a family vacation 2 years ago because Derek had forgotten it was happening until the week before. Marcus had never mentioned paying me back, and I had never brought it up. And that particular $800 had simply dissolved into the ongoing budget of being married to someone whose family operated on the assumption that generosity was a renewable resource with no expiration date. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay on my side of the bed and did the math I had been avoiding for months. Not just about Derek, but about everything. The way Marcus's mother called me every time something broke at her house, because I was so good at handling things. The way his aunt had asked me, twice, to help redesign her small business website, not offered to pay, just asked, with that tone that implied it would be rude to mention money among family. The way I had become, gradually, and without anyone announcing it, the operational backbone of a family that was not even originally mine. I thought about the $19,000 in the garage. I thought about the client shoot I had scheduled for the following Thursday, a product line launch for a skincare brand based out of Austin, paying me $3,200 for a full-day session. I thought about the headshot client booked for the Saturday after. I thought about the 3 photographers who paid me $75 each to rent the space on a rotating monthly basis. Then I thought about Derek eating my leftovers and calling it temporary. By morning, I had my answer. It just wasn't the one Marcus was expecting. "You're right," I told him over coffee. He looked up, surprised by my tone. Not warm, not cold, just even. "The garage situation needs to change. I'll take care of it." He smiled, relieved. "I knew you'd come around. Derek's going to be really grateful." "I'm sure he will," I said. I drank my coffee. It was good coffee. I had bought the beans. I want to be precise about what happened next, because people sometimes assume I acted out of anger. And I didn't. I acted out of clarity. There's a difference. Anger is reactive and messy. Clarity is a spreadsheet. Clarity is a checklist. Clarity is making 12 phone calls in 4 days without raising your voice once. The first call was to my attorney, a woman named Carol who I had used once before for a contract dispute with a difficult client. I explained the situation briefly. She told me what I needed to know about protecting business assets in a shared property context and what documentation I should have in place. I thanked her and hung up. The second call was to my accountant. I needed to understand exactly what a disruption to my studio schedule would cost me over a 3-month period, not hypothetically actually, with numbers. He walked me through it. The figure was not small. The third call was to my real estate agent, a contact I had made through a previous client. I told her I was looking for a commercial studio rental, nothing fancy, just enough square footage, good natural light if possible, ideally a short-term lease while I evaluated options. She said she had 2 listings worth looking at and could show them to me that week. I looked at both spaces on a Wednesday afternoon while Marcus was at work and Derek was watching television. The second one was a ground floor unit in a building 12 minutes from our house. It had 14-foot ceilings, a freight elevator, and a south-facing window that would have made a landscape photographer weep with gratitude. The lease was month to month, with a 30-day notice clause. I signed it that Thursday. I want to be clear about something. I did not tell Marcus. This is the part that people sometimes have opinions about, and I understand that. But I had learned, over 4 years of marriage, that informing Marcus of a plan before it was in motion was an invitation for the plan to be renegotiated, delayed, or quietly buried under the weight of his family's needs. I had learned to be strategic. I had learned it the same way I had learned to insulate garage walls slowly, through trial and error, and mostly alone. Over the next 10 days, I moved my equipment. Not all at once, not dramatically. A few things at a time. I booked the freight elevator on 3 separate evenings after 6 when the building was quiet. My assistant, a part-time photography student named Priya, who I had been working with for 8 months, helped me without asking many questions, which was one of the things I appreciated most about her. By the end of the second week, the garage was empty, except for the fresh paint and the track lighting I had installed, which I left because removing it would have required patching the ceiling, and I was not going to do Marcus any additional favors. The skincare brand shoot happened at the new studio on a Thursday. It went beautifully. The south-facing light did exactly what I had hoped. The client sent me a bonus 2 days later with a note that said the images exceeded expectations. I had already started looking at apartments. I had not made a final decision yet. I want to be fair to the timeline. I was still telling myself I was simply protecting my business. simply creating separation between my professional assets and the increasingly blurry line of what was ours versus what was quietly assumed to be Derek's. But somewhere in the process of signing leases and moving lighting rigs and sitting alone in a beautiful empty studio on a Thursday night eating takeout from the Thai place around the corner, I acknowledged something I had been circling for a while. I was not happy. Not unhappy in a dramatic way. Not in a way that involved shouting or crying or arriving home to find something broken. I was unhappy in the slow, compounding way that happens when someone spends years being treated as a resource rather than a person, and keeps absorbing it because absorption is easier than the conversation, and the conversation never seems worth having because surely things will get better, surely this is just a rough patch, surely Marcus will notice eventually without being told. He had not noticed. He had not noticed that I came home tired every day. He had not noticed that I hadn't laughed at dinner in 3 months. He had not noticed that the woman he married, the one who used to stay up until 2 a.m. editing photos because she loved it, who dragged him to gallery openings he pretended to enjoy, who taught herself drywall repair because she wanted the studio walls to be smooth, had gone very quiet. He had noticed the garage was slowly emptying out. He had asked about it twice, casually. Moving some things around, I told him. Making space. Derek's going to be so relieved, he said. He mentioned he was thinking about setting up a little home gym situation out there. Maybe a TV. I nodded. I made a mental note to call Carol again. The apartment I chose was on the 8th floor of a building near the river. It had a Murphy bed in the second room that folded into a wall, which meant I could use it as a secondary workspace when I needed to review edits at home. It had a parking garage, a gym I would actually use, and a policy against unannounced family members. The last point was not listed in the lease agreement. I made it my own rule. I signed the apartment lease on a Friday. I moved my personal belongings, clothes, toiletries, the books Marcus had always said cluttered the nightstand, my grandmother's quilt, the French press Marcus had once called aggressively extra on a Saturday, while Marcus was at his parents' house for his nephew's birthday party. I had been invited. I had declined, citing a client deadline. The note I left on the kitchen counter was short. It said, "I've moved out. I think we both know this has been coming. I've contacted an attorney. Please don't call me for a few days. I need space to think, and I need you to take this seriously. The mortgage is in both our names, and I've spoken to Carol about next steps. The garage is empty. Derek can have it. Good luck with the home gym." I signed it with my first name. Then I got in my car, drove to my apartment, and ordered the best pizza I had eaten in 4 years. The first 2 days were quiet. I had half expected Marcus to show up at the new studio, which was the only address he might have had for me, but he didn't. On the 3rd day, the texts began. Marcus, 8:14 a.m. Maya, call me. Marcus, 11:32 a.m. I came home and everything was gone. What is happening? Marcus, 2:07 p.m. This isn't funny. Can we please talk? Marcus, 6:50 p.m. I don't understand why you didn't just talk to me. I read them all. I didn't respond to any of them until the 4th day, when I sent a single message. I'm fine. I'm safe. I'll be in touch through Carol regarding next steps. His mother called me on day 5. I let it go to voicemail. Voicemail, Marcus's mother. Maya, honey, I don't know what's going on, but Marcus is beside himself. Whatever happened, I'm sure it can be worked out. Family doesn't just walk away. Call me back, sweetheart. We love you. I noted the "we love you" at the end. It arrived 3 months after she had last spoken to me directly, at Christmas, when she had handed me a dish to dry and said nothing else for the remainder of the evening. Derek texted me from a number I had not saved, but recognized from a group thread. Marcus had added me to the previous year for a camping trip I had organized and paid for entirely, while Derek contributed a bag of chips and a broken flashlight. Derek, 7:22 p.m. Hey Maya, this is Derek. I just want you to know I feel really bad about everything. I didn't know things were like this between you guys. I am going to find somewhere else to stay. I already told Marcus. I appreciated the sentiment enough to read it twice. I did not respond. I had learned to be cautious about Derek's guilt, which tended to arrive large and evaporate quickly. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet Marcus. Not at the house, I was not ready for the house, and I was not sure I ever would be, but at the cafe on Meridian Street where we had gone on our 3rd date, back when I had been naive enough to think that being chosen by someone meant being seen by them. I arrived first and ordered a latte. I did not review what I was going to say. I had been saying it in my head for months already. He looked tired when he walked in. Not the tired of someone who had been working hard, the tired of someone who had been confronted unexpectedly with the consequences of their own choices, and found the confrontation deeply inconvenient. He sat across from me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. "You could have talked to me," he said finally. "I tried," I said. "Several times over several years, in different ways. You were busy." "That's not fair. Marcus, you told me I could figure out my studio situation because I'm resourceful. On the same night, you told me to hand my workspace over to a man who has not held a job for more than 8 months in the past 3 years. That's what you said. Those were your words. I didn't mean. I know what you meant and what you didn't mean. That's actually part of the problem." I wrapped my hands around my latte. "You didn't think very hard about what you were asking. You assumed I would absorb it the same way I've absorbed everything else. The $800 for Derek's vacation share that I never got back. The website I built for your aunt. The 4 years of being the person everyone calls when something needs handling. You never said anything about the money." "I know. That was my mistake. I kept thinking if I was helpful enough and patient enough, eventually you would notice and things would balance out on their own. They didn't." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "So what are you saying? Are we done?" I looked at him. This was the moment I had thought about the most. Not with any pleasure. I want to be clear about that there was nothing satisfying about sitting across from someone I had built a life with and watching the version of us I had imagined slowly stop being possible. But there was something settled in me that hadn't been there before. Something that felt, for the first time in years, like ground. "I'm saying the version of this marriage where I carry more than my share while being told not to make a big deal about it, that version is over," I said. "Whether something else is possible after that is a different conversation. But that conversation can't happen until you actually understand what I'm telling you right now." "I do understand. You understand that I'm upset. That's not the same thing." He stared at the table. I watched him work through something. I could see it on his face. The particular look of a person who has spent a long time being comfortable and is now being asked to expand their awareness in a direction they find uncomfortable. "Derek's staying at my parents' now," he said eventually. "He got a part-time job at the logistics company on Route 9. My mom actually told him he had to, which he stopped. She never did that before." "Good," I said. "The garage just sits empty. It feels stupid now. It cost me $19,000 and 2 years of weekends." It was not stupid. I didn't say the studio was stupid. I meant leaving it empty feels stupid. "Then you should think about what you're going to do with it," I said. "But that decision doesn't involve me asking anyone's permission." "Not anymore." He nodded slowly. I could tell he wanted to reach across the table. He didn't. "I don't want to lose you," he said. It was quiet, without performance. It was probably the most honest thing he had said to me in a long time. "Then you should have thought about what I was worth before you started treating me like a utility." I placed a 10 on the table for my latte and stood up. "Carol will be in touch next week," I said. "Think about what you want. Really think about it, not what's easiest, not what makes your family comfortable. What you actually want." I walked out onto Meridian Street. The air smelled like cut grass and exhaust, and something faintly sweet from the bakery 2 doors down. It was an ordinary Tuesday. There was nothing cinematic about it. A pigeon was doing something undignified near a trash can. A teenager on a bike almost ran a red light and then didn't. The sun was the kind of pale yellow that exists in early May when summer hasn't committed yet. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and did not look back at the cafe window. My phone buzzed. A calendar notification, new client consultation, Thursday at 2 p.m. A restaurant group in the city wanted a full portfolio shoot for their rebrand. The inquiry had come through my website, which I had updated with the new studio address the week before. The budget they had mentioned in the initial email was the largest I had ever been quoted in a single project. I walked to my car. I want to say something about what comes after moments like this, because I think people who have never been in them imagine a clean break, like something in a movie where the music swells and the credits roll and you walk into your new life looking composed and certain. That's not what it's like. What it's like is that you cry in your apartment at 11 on a Wednesday because you remembered a trip you took together in year 2 before things calcified, When Marcus had surprised you with a drive to the coast and you had taken photographs on film and the whole day had smelled like salt and felt like possibility. What it's like is that you sit with a spreadsheet of joint accounts and feel something complicated that is not quite grief and not quite relief and doesn't have a clean name. But you do the spreadsheet anyway, because the work doesn't stop for your feelings. The clients still need their images. Priya still needs her schedule. The south-facing studio still needs to be unlocked at 8 in the morning. I know people who have made themselves small to keep a peace that was never really peaceful. I understand why they do it. I did it for years, and it felt like generosity. Like love, like being the kind of person who doesn't make things difficult. The problem with making yourself small is that eventually you forget what size you actually are. You forget that the $19,000 was yours. You forget that the client list took 7 years. You forget that the French press you bought is, in fact, aggressively excellent. I remembered, in the end. 3 months later, I received a check in the mail from Marcus's attorney. It was the agreed-upon portion of the joint savings, structured per Carol's guidance. I deposited it on a Thursday afternoon, on my way to the studio. There was a new piece of equipment waiting for me when I arrived. A lighting modifier. I had been researching for 6 months, and had finally ordered for myself with money that was entirely mine. Priya helped me unbox it. She held the diffusion panel up to the window, and watched the light scatter across the room in a way that made both of us stop talking for a second. "That's gorgeous," she said. "Yeah," I said. I meant it. I meant the light. I also meant the room and the lease I had signed, and the consultation on my calendar, and the 8 years of work that had made all of it possible. I set up the shot. There's a version of this story where I tell you everything resolved cleanly. Marcus grew into someone different. Derek turned his life around. His mother called to apologize for the holiday dish-drying silence. Maybe some of those things happen eventually. I'm not there yet in the telling. What I can tell you is what I know right now, which is this. I have a studio with 14-foot ceilings and a south-facing window. I have a client list that keeps growing. I have a Murphy bed that folds into a wall, a French press that is aggressively excellent, and an apartment where nobody eats my leftovers. Every morning I make coffee and sit at my editing station, and I work. Not because someone needs me to, not because refusing would cause a problem, but because the work is mine, and I am good at it, and I have stopped waiting for anyone else to notice that before I do. The garage back at the house on Clement Street sat empty for 6 weeks after I left, from what I heard. Eventually, Marcus converted it into a proper guest room. With insulation he hired someone to install. It apparently turned out nicely. He used the same YouTube tutorial I had bookmarked 2 years earlier. I noticed that when he mentioned it, he did not seem to find it ironic. I decided that was not my problem anymore. A lot of things, I have learned, are not my problem anymore. It turns out that's not a loss. It turns out it's an enormous amount of room.